What would you do if the woman who gave you life was standing 3 feet from you and you didn't know her face? What if you'd spent 40 years believing she was dead, buried in a plot somewhere you'd never been told to visit, grieved by you every single birthday in the quiet, private way a man grieves a ghost he never met? What if she'd spent 40 years believing you were dead too? And what if the two of you, mother and son, separated by a lie that had lasted longer than either of your adult lives, walked into the same room on the same cold Tuesday morning, and neither one of you recognized the other, because time had made her a stranger, and because the only picture you had of her in your head was the picture a 5-year-old boy drew with a pencil he found on the kitchen floor the day they told him his mama wasn't coming back? Before I tell you what happened next, and there is a lot, and none of it is simple, do me one favor. If this story is already finding its way into your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to Mama Told Me, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. Mama always said kindness travels farther than you think. I want to see how far it's traveling tonight. Now sit back. Let me take you all the way to the beginning. His name was Raphael Hayes. You've seen his name somewhere, even if you don't remember where. On the side of a freight container at a port. On the top of a logistics tower in a city you've flown through. In a magazine you flipped past in an airport waiting room, under the words 40 under 40. Raphael was 42 years old the morning this story began. He was worth just over $2 billion. He owned a brown glass tower on the east side of the city, with his name across the top in letters so clean and so tall that pilots used them to orient themselves on final approach. He slept in a bedroom with a window the size of a garage door that looked out over the whole harbor. He had a closet with 72 shirts, all of them white, all of them pressed by a woman named Constance who had worked for him for 9 years and who he still sometimes called ma'am because he could not quite get used to the idea of a woman older than him being in his employ. He had everything. You understand me? Everything. And yet if you'd asked the few people who knew him well, and there were very few, what kind of man Raphael Hayes was, they would have told you he was a hollow man. Not a bad one. Not a cruel one. Just hollow, like a room with beautiful furniture and no one ever sitting in the chairs. He did not have a wife. He did not have children. He was not, that the papers had ever found out about, in love with anyone. He worked 16 hours most days. On the 7th day, he slept. And on the nights when he couldn't sleep, which were more nights than not, he would stand at that garage door window in his bedroom and look out at the lights of the ships at anchor in the harbor and think about his mother. He'd been told all his life that she died bringing him into the world. That was the story. He had grown up with it the way other children grow up with a nightlight. It was on when he went to sleep. It was on when he woke up. Your mother loved you very much, Raphael. She held you for 6 minutes before the Lord took her home. She named you after the archangel because she wanted you to have a guardian, since she couldn't stay to be your mother herself. That's what the paper said. That's what the social worker told him when he was old enough to read. That's what Dorothea Calloway, the long-faced, long-fingered director of Halcyon House, repeated to him in her office on the day he turned 5, when she signed him over to the couple from 2 states away who had come to collect him in a long, dark car that smelled like leather and expensive perfume. Your mama's with the angels, baby. You got a new family now. Don't you cry. Nobody wants a boy who cries. He hadn't cried. He'd learned not to cry that morning, and he had kept not crying for 37 years since. The couple who raised him were not wicked people. I want you to understand that because it matters. They were not the kind of adoptive parents you hear about in terrible stories. They were just, and forgive me, but this is the truth, they were just people who wanted a child because it looked correct to have one. 2 lawyers in a city far from Halcyon. 2 people who had a spare bedroom, and a financial advisor who had suggested that tax-advantaged philanthropic adoption would round out their public profile. They called him son. They sent him to schools with tall iron gates. They did not hug him. They did not ask him what he dreamed about. When he graduated from his private high school at 17 and told them he was leaving for a state college 400 miles away because he'd gotten a scholarship and he did not want to accept their money, they said, "All right, Raphael, call us on holidays." He had called them on holidays. He had called them on holidays for 25 years. But he had never, not once in all of that time, stopped turning the same question over in the dark of his mind like a coin he was trying to memorize. What was my mother's name? Not the one the papers said. The real one. The one she was called when she was a little girl herself. The one her own mother had spoken in the dark when she was sick with a fever. The one that belonged, really and truly, to the woman whose body had made his body. He had tried, over the years, to find it. Quietly, privately, through the kind of investigators you can afford when you have money like his. And every time he had tried, the trail had run cold at the same place. At the doors of a small, crumbling, once beautiful orphanage called Halcyon House, on a stretch of country road 2 hours outside the city where he had built his empire. The papers at Halcyon said his mother was unknown. The date of her death was unknown. Her place of burial was unknown. Her age was unknown. Unknown, unknown, unknown. The most terrible word in the English language when the thing you're trying to know is where you came from. For a long time he had accepted it. You accept things after a while. That's what grown men do. He had built his company. He had built his tower. He had built a life so full of hard, bright, measurable achievements that most days he could almost forget the soft, unmeasurable grief living like a house guest in the back bedroom of his own chest. And then, on a Tuesday morning in the middle of a cold, colorless November, an envelope landed on his desk that changed everything. Understood. Underscoring for his assistant, a sharp young woman named Imani, put it on his desk with his morning coffee and a slight frown. This came through General Mail, sir. Handwritten. I'd usually throw it out, but I thought you might want to see it. Raphael looked up. Why? It's from Halcyon House. He went very still. He hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in 20 years. Not since he'd asked his investigators to stop. Not since he'd decided, one particularly bad night in his 30s, that some questions were better left as questions, because answers could hurt worse than wondering. Halcyon House was a word he kept in a drawer inside his own head, a drawer he kept locked. He waited until Imani closed the door before he opened the envelope. The handwriting was neat, the kind of handwriting you don't see anymore, looped and careful, written with a real pen on real paper. The letter was 2 pages long. It was signed, at the bottom, by Dorothea Calloway, director. Dorothea Calloway. She would have to be, what, 75 now? 76? He could not believe she was still there. He could not believe she was still alive. He read the letter twice, then a third time, slower. It was, as these things tend to be, a letter about money. Halcyon House was closing, the letter said, unless a miracle came. The county had cut its funding. The building was failing. The roof, the pipes, the old coal furnace that had been converted to something equally unreliable in the 70s. There were only 19 children left in the home. The staff was down to 4 full-time workers and a handful of volunteers who came on weekends. If Halcyon could not raise $2.4 million in the next 90 days, the doors would close, and the children would be sent, scattered, was the word she used, scattered to whichever facilities in the state still had beds. We are writing to you, Dorothea Calloway had written, because you are one of our own. You walked through our front door on the 12th of March when you were 3 days old. You walked out of it on the 5th of January of your 5th year. Whatever kind of man you became, Mr. Hayes, some part of you was made inside our walls. We would not ask this if we were not standing at the end of everything. We are asking. Raphael sat in his chair with the letter in his hand for a long time. Outside his window, the harbor was gray and the ships were the color of teeth. He did not think about the money. $2.4 million was nothing to him. $2.4 million was the cost of a bad day in the commodities market. If he had wanted to, he could have written the check before he finished his coffee. But he did not write the check. Instead, he stood up. He walked to the big window. He looked at the gray harbor and the teeth-colored ships. And he made a decision that, if you had known Raphael Hayes in those years, would have astonished you completely. He decided to go in person. Understood. Underscore. He did not tell Imani the full reason why. He told her to clear his Thursday and Friday. He told her to have the car brought around. He told her to cancel a call with a board in Singapore and to tell them he had a family emergency. Family emergency. He said it. He heard himself say it. And he thought, that's the first true thing I've said in this office in 9 years. He drove himself. He did not take the driver. He took the smaller car, the one he bought 10 years ago and never let anyone replace, a plain dark sedan that had been through 2 sets of tires and 1 long cross-country drive. He put the letter on the passenger seat beside him. He put a small paper bag beside the letter. Inside the bag was a pencil drawing on a piece of yellowed notebook paper, folded in quarters, the ink so old it had gone almost silver. He had drawn it when he was 5. It was a picture of a woman with long hair and a round face. He had written me Mama underneath it in the unsteady hand of a child who had only just learned the letters. He had kept it, that drawing, in a safe deposit box for 37 years, and he had taken it out this morning for the first time in almost a decade because he just knew, that he couldn't drive back to Halcyon without it. The road out of the city is a road I want you to see. 4 lanes of highway for about 40 minutes, then 2 lanes, then a turnoff, then a long stretch of 2-lane road that curves up into country you forget exists until you're in it. Dairy farms, empty silos, 1 gas station every 20 miles or so, with a hand-painted sign that said hot coffee, pie. Trees whose leaves had already dropped, standing bare against a sky the color of old milk. Raphael drove. He did not play music. He let the silence sit with him. Somewhere around the 100-mile mark, he realized his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Just a little, just enough that he had to grip it harder to keep them still. He had not cried in 37 years. But something in his chest that morning, as the country opened up around him and the old road curled toward the place where his life had started, was doing something dangerously close to it. He did not let it. He just drove. And 2 hours and 40 minutes after he left his office, he came around the last bend in the road. And there, exactly where it had been for 116 years, was Halcyon House. Underscore, 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 underscore. It was smaller than he remembered. Everyone says that, don't they, about the places of their childhood? They all say it. It was smaller than I remembered. But it's true, and it's true in a particular way, because the thing that was large about Halcyon House when he was a child was not the building. It was the sky over it. It was the gravel in the front yard that hurt his knees when he fell. It was the porch railing he couldn't reach. It was the smell of the kitchen at 5 in the morning, bread rising, and the old woman who ran the kitchen singing under her breath in a language he did not know. The building was a 3-story house of dark red brick, the color brick gets when it has stood through 116 winters. It had a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides, a porch he'd run the length of so many times as a small boy that he'd worn a dark streak in the paint under the eastern railing. There were 6 tall, narrow windows across the front. The shutters on 2 of them were missing 1 slat each, the way a child's smile is missing a tooth. A rusted iron bell hung from a frame near the front door. The bell, he suddenly remembered, had been rung every morning at 6:45. You washed your hands when you heard it. You stood by your bed until the matron came. A white van from the local grocery was parked in the driveway. A folded wheelchair leaned against the porch. A cat, a big orange cat who had, to judge by his size, taken the job of orphanage cat very seriously, was asleep in the patch of thin winter sunlight on the top step. Raphael parked his car. He took a minute. He let his hands stop shaking. Then he picked up the paper bag with his old drawing in it, and he got out, and he walked up the path he had last walked down at the age of 5. The gravel crunched under his shoes the way it had crunched under his shoes 37 years ago. That was the first thing that broke him a little, if I'm telling you the truth. That sound. The body remembers sounds before the mind does. The body remembers smells and weather and the angle of light on a porch before the mind can name what it's remembering. His body remembered that gravel. It remembered it so hard that he had to stop halfway up the path and put his hand on the railing post and breathe. The big orange cat, open one eye, and watched him and closed it again. Apparently the cat had decided Raphael was not worth the trouble. Raphael climbed the steps. He stood at the front door. He raised his hand to knock. Before his knuckles reached the wood, the door opened. A woman stood in the doorway. She was not tall. She was not young. She was 60, maybe more likely a little past it. Her hair was the color of pewter, pulled back in a tight and practical bun that had loose strands at the edges from whatever work she had just come from. She was wearing a faded blue dress under an apron that had clearly been washed 1,000 times. The apron had a big front pocket, and the front pocket had what looked like 2 clothespins and a small plastic dinosaur sticking out of it. Her hands were clean, but red at the knuckles, the way the hands of a woman who has washed a lot of dishes and a lot of clothes in a lot of cold water will get red at the knuckles and stay that way. She had brown eyes. I want you to remember that. She had brown eyes, soft and steady, the particular warm brown of river water in late summer. She had a small round face that must have been very pretty when she was young. Her eyebrows arched a little in the middle when she was uncertain about something, which was a thing she did not know she did because nobody had ever told her. And when she smiled, though she was not smiling yet, not in that first half second on the porch, you could see one tooth in the bottom row that was turned just slightly sideways, as if it had tried to grow in at a polite angle and the rest of her mouth had not quite made room. Raphael did not smile back. He was not smiling. He was not doing anything. He was standing very still on the porch holding a paper bag in his left hand and looking at a woman he had never met in his life, and his chest was doing something strange. "Can I help you, son?" the woman said. Her voice was soft. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had spent her life not needing to be loud because the children she spoke to were always close enough to hear. Son. She called him son. And Raphael Hayes, who was a man worth $2 billion and who had not called anyone mother in 37 years, and who had not been called son by a woman older than him and longer than that, felt something in his throat catch on something in his chest. He cleared his throat. He cleared it again. "My name is Raphael Hayes," he said. "I received a letter from Mrs. Calloway." The woman's face changed. Not dramatically. She was not, I think, a woman who had a dramatic face, but something softened and something sharpened at once. She looked at him more carefully. Her eyes moved across his face. They stopped for a half second on his eyebrows. They moved to his mouth. They came back up to his eyes. She did not know him. She did not know who he was. She did not know that the man standing on her porch with a paper bag in his hand was the baby she had carried into the same porch one March morning when she was 20 years old and too poor and too alone to keep him. She did not know because she believed that baby had died of pneumonia in a house in a country she had never been to 5 years after she had signed the papers that sent him away. She did not know. How could she have? But something in her face in that half second on the porch, something in the way her eyebrows arched just slightly in the middle, and her hands twisted the corner of her apron, and her soft brown eyes stayed on his face half a second longer than politeness allowed. Something in her was not quite sure. Something in her was saying, underneath the part of her that knew, "I've stood on a porch with you before." She did not know what that was. She probably thought she was just tired. She had been up since 4. She had peeled potatoes for 39. She had changed 3 beds. Her back was aching in the place it always ached. She smiled, finally, the small, polite smile of a working woman greeting a stranger. "Oh," she said, "you've come about the letter. Come in, Mr. Hayes. Mrs. Calloway will want to speak to you herself." "I'll get her." A pause. "I'm sorry, my hands." She looked down at her red-knuckled hands, already starting to wipe them on the apron. "I've been in the laundry." "It's all right," Raphael said. She stepped back to let him in. He stepped past her into the front hall of the orphanage, and the smell of the place hit him the way a wave hits when you're not expecting it. Bread. Bleach. The particular dry dust smell of an old radiator in an old hallway. And underneath all of it, so faint he almost missed it, the smell of lavender soap. He knew that smell. He had known that smell for 42 years without ever being able to say what it was. It was the smell he had chased, without knowing he was chasing it, through every expensive hotel and every beautiful borrowed country and every perfumed woman he had ever stood too close to at a charity event in his life. It was the smell that had lived in the back rooms of his dreams. He did not know why he knew it, but he knew it. The woman closed the door behind him. "I'll go find Mrs. Calloway," she said. "Can I get you anything? A cup of tea? I was just about to put the kettle on for the afternoon shift." Raphael looked at her. He looked at her small round face and her river water eyes and the single sideways tooth in her smile. He looked at her red-knuckled hands. He looked at the little plastic dinosaur peeking out of her apron pocket. "Tea would be wonderful," he said. "Thank you." "What's your name again, son?" she asked, already turning toward the kitchen. "I'll need to tell Mrs. Calloway." "Raphael," he said. "Raphael Hayes." She paused just for a second, just for a breath. Her hand went, without her noticing, to the pocket of her apron, to the little plastic dinosaur. She touched it the way a person touches a rosary. "That's a lovely name," she said quietly. "The Archangel. The Protector." "Yes," Raphael said. His voice was not entirely steady. "That's what I'm told." She turned toward the kitchen then, and he watched her go. Something in him, some part of him he could not name, did not want her to walk away. "Ma'am," he called gently. She stopped. She turned. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know your name." She smiled. The sideways tooth caught the hallway light. "Rosa," she said. "Rosa Meyer. I just work in the kitchen and the laundry. Been here a long time." "How long?" Raphael asked. Rosa Meyer, his mother, whose body had made his body, who had held him for exactly 11 days in a one-room apartment above a dry cleaner's when she was 20 years old, who had brought him here wrapped in a hand-knit blanket she had made herself with yarn she had bought by saving up coins in a jar on the windowsill, who had signed the papers she had been told were temporary while she got on her feet, who had come back 3 months later ready to take him home, who had been told by Dorothea Calloway that her son had been adopted by a lovely family and it was far too late to undo it, who had been told 2 years later by that same woman that her son had died of pneumonia overseas, and she was so sorry, she was so very sorry. That woman, now 63 years old and living in a small staff room at the back of the orphanage where she had stayed every day of the 40 years since, because it was the last place on earth she had held her baby, so it was the last place on earth she was ever going to leave. That woman looked at the tall, dark, expensive suited stranger in the front hall, and she told him the truth she had told every stranger who had ever asked her that question for 37 years. 37 years this January, Rosa Meyer said. "Since I was 26. "That's a long time," Raphael said. "It's a lifetime," Rosa said. And then, because she was polite, and because she did not know that the hand of God had just walked through her front door in a dark coat and a paper bag, she turned and went to put the kettle on. Raphael stood in the hallway with the lavender soap smell and his old drawing in his paper bag and the sound of his own heart in his ears, and he thought, very quietly, to himself, something is wrong here. He did not yet know what, but something, somewhere in the oldest and smallest part of him, had begun to count again. The kitchen at Halcyon House was warm in the way old kitchens are warm, not from modern heating, but from the thing itself being alive. A cast-iron stove on the back wall, putting out more heat than it had any right to. A pot of something on the back burner that smelled like onions and bay leaf, and the long patience of a woman who cooks for 39 people on a budget for 4. Copper pots hanging from a rack overhead, their bottoms blackened from 40 years of honest use. Rosa set a mug in front of him at the long pine table. She poured from a chipped brown pot. She slid a small blue saucer of sugar cubes toward him without asking if he wanted them, which was the kind of small kindness that made Raphael's throat do that thing again. "How many sugars?" she asked. "2," he said. She smiled. "Same as my," she stopped. She laughed at herself, a small private laugh, and shook her head. "Never mind. I was going to tell you something foolish." "Tell me," Raphael said. She looked at him. Her river water eyes held his for a second too long, and then moved away, the way a shy thing moves when you've looked at it directly. "I was going to say, same as my boy takes his. But my boy's been gone a long time, Mr. Hayes. And I don't know why I said it just now. Sometimes a face will remind you of something. You know how it is." Raphael's hand, reaching for the sugar, stopped. Your boy, he said, carefully, like a man putting his foot onto ice he wasn't sure about. Rosa turned back to the counter. Her back was to him. She was, Raphael noticed, suddenly very busy with a dish towel. He passed, she said. A long time ago. Well, he was still small. It's not a story for company, son. Son. She had said it again. The second time was worse than the first. Raphael sat with his mug between his hands. He did not stir the sugar. He watched her back. He watched the gray pewter bun at the base of her neck and the small movements of her shoulders as she folded and refolded the dish towel that did not need folding. He was a man who had interrogated 1,000 men across 1,000 boardroom tables. He had learned, young, to read the body before the mouth. And the body across that kitchen from him was saying, grief. Old grief. The kind you carry for so long it stops being a weight and becomes a part of the way you stand. I'm sorry, he said softly. Oh, don't be, Rosa said. She turned around, smiling, a smile so practiced it had worn a little groove into her cheeks. It was a long time ago. 40 years this January, if you can believe it. I keep thinking one of these days I won't remember the exact month anymore. But I always do. 40 years this January. Raphael was 42. He did not move his face. He had, in 42 years, become very good at not moving his face. But underneath the still surface of his expression, a thing he had not allowed to speak in a very long time began, quietly, to speak. It isn't possible, the thing said. But what if? The thing said. Don't, Raphael told the thing. Don't you dare. Because he had been here before. In his 30s, when he had first had money enough to hire investigators, he had allowed himself to hope, foolishly, wildly, the way a man hopes who has never allowed himself to hope before, and every single trail had ended at this building, at a sealed file at the word unknown. He had learned, the hard way, what hope cost when you let it run ahead of evidence. And he had promised himself, at 35, sitting in the back of a taxi in a city he was about to leave, that he would never let it run ahead again. So he did not let it run ahead now. He sipped his tea. He said, "This is very good. It's just a tea bag, son." Still, Rosa's sideways tooth caught the kitchen light again. She looked, for a moment, like a girl. Footsteps in the hall, then. Deliberate footsteps. The footsteps of a person who wants you to hear her coming. Rosa's smile shut down like a lamp. Dorothea Calloway came into the kitchen. She was taller than Raphael remembered. People usually get smaller when you become an adult. Dorothea had somehow gotten taller. She was 75 if she was a day, and she stood straight as a fence post. Her hair was white and set into a helmet of careful curls. She wore a skirt suit the color of a bruise and a small gold cross on a chain in her throat. Her mouth was the mouth of a woman who had said no in her life more times than she had said yes, and had grown to prefer the shape of the first word to the second. "Mr. Hayes," she said, and she put out her hand, and her hand was cool and dry and strong. "I cannot tell you what it means that you've come in person. I was expecting, at most, a letter from an assistant. I wanted to see it myself." Of course. Her eyes flicked, briefly and precisely, to Rosa. "Rosa, thank you for settling Mr. Hayes. I'll take him from here. Don't you have the afternoon wash?" "Yes, ma'am." "Off you go, then." Rosa did not look at Raphael as she left the kitchen. She untied her apron as she walked. She did not, he noticed, take the plastic dinosaur out of the pocket. She carried the apron with the dinosaur still in it, like it mattered. When she was gone, Dorothea smiled at Raphael. Her smile did not move the rest of her face. "A sweet woman," she said. "Simple. She's been with us a long time. Sometimes we keep people on, you understand, more for their sake than for the work's sake. Nowhere else for them to go." Raphael said nothing. "Come," Dorothea said. "I'll show you what we're fighting to save." Understood. She walked him through the house. The common room, where 4 children were doing a jigsaw puzzle on a rug that had a burn mark in the middle of it. The chapel, which was really just a small room with 6 pews and a cracked stained glass window of a dove. The dormitories on the second floor, where the beds were made so tightly you could have bounced a coin on them, and where each small bedside table held a plastic cup and a Bible and, in some cases, a single photograph face down. Dorothea narrated as they walked. She used words like stewardship and legacy and our founder's vision. She walked with her hands clasped behind her back. She had opinions about the federal government and the county assessor and the way young people these days did not know the value of patience. Raphael listened. He nodded in the right places. He asked intelligent questions about the furnace and the roof and the timeline on the structural report. But the whole time, part of him was looking for her. For Rosa. He did not know why. He had not decided yet. He was not yet a man who could say to himself, out loud, "That woman is my mother." He was still a man with too much scar tissue to say a thing like that. But his eyes were looking anyway, the way your eyes look for a person in a crowd before you have named what it is about them that's pulling you. Once, passing a window that looked out on the back garden, he saw her. She was hanging wet sheets on a line strung between 2 old pines. The sun had come out a little and was shining the color of pale honey on the wet sheets and on her gray pewter hair. She was singing, though he could not hear her through the glass. He could only see her mouth moving. She was singing with a clothespin between her teeth, the way women who have hung laundry for 40 years learn to do, without thinking. He stopped. For 1/2 second, he stopped. Dorothea, walking a pace ahead of him, noticed. "Mr. Hayes? Sorry. It's a beautiful view." Dorothea turned. She looked out at the back garden. She looked at Rosa. She looked at Raphael. Something moved in Dorothea Calloway's face. Very small, very brief. The kind of micro-shift a man like Raphael, who had spent 20 years reading faces across tables, caught without wanting to. "Yes," Dorothea said smoothly. "The grounds are lovely. The original plantings, go back to the founders. Shall we continue? I want to show you the records room." The records room was in the basement. It was a small stone room, cool, smelling of paper and damp. Shelves from floor to ceiling. 3 long metal filing cabinets against one wall, the paint on them gone mostly to rust at the corners. A single bulb in a wire cage overhead, giving the kind of light that makes everything look like it's in an old photograph. "This," Dorothea said, with a small note of pride, "is 116 years of Halcyon House. Every child who has come through our doors, every placement, every family contact, it's all here. We've kept very careful records. Not many institutions can say that." Raphael's fingers, without him asking them to, brushed the edge of one of the filing cabinets. "Every child," he said. "Every one. Including me?" There was the smallest, most precise half-second of pause before Dorothea answered. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. Though, and I say this gently, the files from the period in which you came to us are, I'm afraid, limited. It was a different era. Not every question was asked. Not every answer was recorded. You told me once," Raphael said, and he was not sure, even as he was saying it, why he was saying it, only that something in him had decided to stop being polite when I was 5 years old in your office on the morning the Hayeses came to take me, that my mother had died bringing me into the world. You told me she held me for 6 minutes before the Lord took her." Dorothea's face did not change. "That is what we were told, Mr. Hayes." "By whom?" "By the birth mother's family. It was quite a long time ago. Do you have any record of that?" "As I said, the files from that period are limited." Raphael looked at her for a long moment. He noticed, breathing very slowly. The way he breathed in the half-second before he closed on a negotiation. The way he breathed when he had identified, across a table, the exact place where a man was lying. "Mrs. Calloway," he said quietly, "I'm going to write you a check for the full amount. Today, before I leave this building." Dorothea's face opened like a flower. Mr. Hayes, I don't know what to. I haven't finished. She stopped. I'm going to write you a check for the full amount, he said. And in return, I'd like to spend the weekend here. As a guest. I'd like to eat what the children eat. I like to sleep in the guest room. I like to walk the grounds. And I'd like, he let his eyes hold hers, to look at whatever records you have from the period in which I came to you, limited or not. For the first time since she had entered the kitchen, Dorothea Calloway was not entirely sure what to say. That's most generous, Mr. Hayes. Most generous. We would of course be honored to host you. But the records are a condition, Raphael said softly. I'm sure you understand. She looked at him, and for a bare flicker of a second, somewhere behind the helmet of white curls and the cool dry hand and the small gold cross, Raphael saw, not fear exactly, but the thing that comes just before fear. The recalculation of a person who has been certain of her ground for a long time and has just felt it move. Of course, Mr. Hayes, Dorothea Calloway said. Of course. I'll have the files brought up for you this evening. Underscore. Underscore, he stayed. Imani, on the phone, did not ask questions. She rearranged his week with the quick competence of a person who had long ago stopped being surprised by her employer and had simply learned to manage what he gave her. His clothes, a small bag, nothing ostentatious, were couriered up from the city by dinner time. He ate in the dining hall with the children. He sat at the long table with the 19 of them, on a bench that was too low for his legs, and he ate stew and bread and drank water from a tin cup. He did not make a production of being there. He just was there. A small boy with a shaved head and a front tooth missing asked him if he was going to be the new janitor. Raphael said he didn't think so, but he could be persuaded. The small boy considered this seriously and then passed him the butter without being asked. Rosa served at the long table. She moved between the kitchen and the dining room with quiet, economical movements. She did not look at Raphael particularly, but once, passing behind his chair with a pitcher of water, she paused, just for half a second, and her hand, the red-knuckled hand a woman who had hung laundry that afternoon, came to rest, for no reason either of them would have been able to name, on the back of his chair, right above his shoulder blade. She did not touch him. She touched the wood. But her hand was there for the span of one breath. Then she walked on, and Raphael Hayes, who could not remember the last time someone had stood behind his chair at a dinner, sat very still, and did not look up, and did not breathe. Underscore. That night, he lay on a narrow bed in the guest room on the 3rd floor. The bed had a quilt on it that had been washed so many times the pattern was almost gone. The mattress sank a little in the middle. The window looked out over the same back garden where Rosa had hung the sheets. He could not sleep. At a little past midnight, he got up. He put on his shoes and his coat, and he went down the back stairs, the ones that creaked on the 4th and 7th step, and he went out into the garden. The sheets were gone from the line. The air was cold enough to see your breath. There was a half moon. He walked to the edge of the garden, where a low stone wall separated the orphanage grounds from the field beyond. He put his hands on the wall. He let himself look, for the first time all day, at the thing he had not let himself look at. What if the kitchen woman with the river water eyes and the sideways tooth and the plastic dinosaur in her apron pocket was, somehow, impossibly, against everything he had been told his whole life, the woman who had made his body? What if he had been lied to? What if he had been lied to? What if Dorothea Calloway, with her small gold cross and her straight back and her careful curls, had been standing between them for 40 years? It should have been an impossible thought. It should have broken against the sea wall of everything he had been told. But the thing about lies, Mama used to say, and Raphael had never had a mama, so he was using somebody else's mama here, borrowing the wisdom the way a cold man borrows a coat. The thing about lies is that they are expensive to maintain, and the older they get, the more cracks they develop. And if you are patient, And if you're quiet, and if you put your ear to the right place at the right time, a long enough lie will always begin to leak. He stood in the coal garden. He breathed. Behind him, a voice said, "You'll catch your death out here, son." He turned. Rosa was standing in the open back door, a shawl around her shoulders, a cup of something in her hand. She had seen him from her window, apparently. She had come down. She had brought 2 cups. "I couldn't sleep either," she said. She crossed the grass in her slippers, which Raphael noticed with a quiet small agony were thin and old, and she handed him one of the cups. "It's just warm milk, with a drop of honey. My mother used to give it to me when I was a girl. My mother used to give it to me." He took the cup. Their fingers touched for a half-second. Her fingers were warm from the cup. She smelled, up close, of lavender soap and bread and the faint clean sweetness of laundry starch. "Thank you, Rosa." They stood at the wall together. Neither of them spoke for a little while. That was fine. Some silences are full, and some are empty, and this one was the first kind. After a long while, she said, very quietly, almost to herself, "It's strange. All day I've been thinking about my boy. I don't let myself. But today, for some reason, she trailed off." Raphael waited. He did not press. A man who pushes at a moment like that is a man who loses it. "I had this feeling at the front door this morning," Rosa said. "When I opened it, and there you were on the porch. Just for a half-second. I thought, for no reason at all, I thought Elias." She laughed, small and embarrassed. "That was his name, you see. Elias. It means the Lord is my God. I picked it because I was very alone when I picked it, and I wanted him to have a strong name. Something bigger than me. Something that would protect him after I signed the papers." Raphael could not breathe. He had been called Raphael all his life, an archangel name, the protector, by people who had told him his mother had named him. But his mother, if this woman was his mother, and he was very much no longer sure she was not, had named him something else. Elias. He stared at the half-moon over the field. If this story is finding its way into your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Mama Told Me. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, and more of them coming your way. He turned his head, slowly, to look at her. "Rosa," he said, and his voice was not the voice of a billionaire. It was the voice of a 5-year-old boy who had once sat on a gravel path and drawn a picture of a woman with a pencil he'd found on a kitchen floor. "The blanket, when you gave him up, was it blue?" Rosa Meyer, who was 63 years old, who had not told this story to anyone in 30 years, who had not been asked about it by anyone in longer than that, looked at the tall stranger in the expensive coat standing beside her stone wall in the middle of the night drinking warm milk from her kitchen, and her small round face went very, very still. "It was blue," she said slowly. "I knitted it myself. I bought the yarn in a shop on Calle Diocesate with coins I saved in a jar on my windowsill for 4 months. A pause. Her hands, around her cup, had begun to tremble. "How did you know that, son?" Raphael set his cup on the stone wall. His hand was not steady. He reached into the deep inside pocket of his coat. He had brought it down with him, in a way he had not quite been able to explain to himself when he was putting on the coat upstairs. He had brought it without knowing why. He unfolded the paper. The old yellow paper with a silvering pencil. The child's drawing of a woman with a round face and long hair. The child's handwriting underneath that said, in the slightly crooked letters of a 5-year-old, "Me mama." He turned it around. He held out to her. "Because," he said, and his voice broke in the middle of the word, "my adoptive mother saved every drawing I ever did. And when she died, she sent them to me in a box. And this one, Rosa, this one I drew when I was 5 years old, the day before I was taken from here." Rosa looked at the paper. She looked at the child's drawing, at the round face, at the long hair, at the words, "Me mama." Her hand, the red-knuckled hand that had hung laundry that afternoon and stirred stew that evening and rested on the back of his chair at dinner, came up very slowly and covered her mouth. And somewhere inside her, somewhere in a room in her chest she had not unlocked in 40 years, because she had been told to bury it, because she had been told her boy was gone, because she had been told to stop waiting and start accepting. Somewhere in that long-locked room, A door began, very slowly and very painfully and very beautifully, to open. Elias, Rosa Meyer whispered. They stood in the garden for a long time after she said the name. She did not fall into his arms. He did not fall into hers. That is not how this kind of thing happens. Not really, not when the two people have each spent 40 years building a life on top of the grave of the other. You do not tear down a house that fast. You stand in the cold with a cup of warm milk in your hand and a child's drawing trembling between you, and you let the thing be true in small pieces, because all at once would break you. Rosa did not take her hand from her mouth. She was making no sound. Her shoulders were shaking so gently you would not have noticed unless you were watching. Raphael was watching. They told me you died, son, she finally said, through her hand. They told me pneumonia. In a country I had never been to. They said the family sent a letter. They said there had been a small service. They said there was no body to come home to because it had already been. Her voice broke. They said 2 years after I signed. They said I had to stop writing to ask. They said it was cruel to the family to keep asking. They said I had to let you rest. Who told you that, Rosa? Rosa did not answer with a name. She did not have to. She just looked, slowly, up at the third-floor window of Halcyon House, where a single light was still on, burning in the private apartment of Dorothea Calloway, who had not yet gone to bed, who was almost certainly, right at that moment, looking down in her own back garden at the site of her longest and most careful lie walking toward the ruin of itself. They went back inside a little before 1 in the morning. Raphael did not go up to the guest room. He sat at the long pine table in the kitchen, in the chair he had sat in that afternoon, and Rosa sat across from him, and they did not talk for a long time. Rosa had brought the drawing in with her and laid it on the table between them, smoothing it with her fingertips the way a woman smooths a wrinkle out of a child's shirt. Then, slowly, she began to talk. She told him about a one-room apartment above a dry cleaner's on Calle d'Isazayat. She told him about a jar of coins on a windowsill and a ball of pale blue yarn bought for $3.75. She told him about a boy she had known for one summer who had gone back to his family in the fall and had not known, and would never know, that she was carrying. She told him about the night she had gone into labor alone in that one room, and about the neighbor who had heard her and called a midwife. She told him about 11 days of holding him before she walked him up the gravel path at Halcyon House, with a blue blanket and a letter she had written begging them to keep him safe until she could save enough to bring him home. She told him she had come back 3 months later with a paper bag full of saved wages and a plan. She told him what Dorothea Calloway had said to her at the front door. Rosa, dear, it's far too late. He was placed last month. A lovely family. They wanted him very much. You signed the papers, dear. You signed them. She told him she had not understood. She had said, but those were only temporary. And Dorothea Calloway had said, with great and patient regret, they were not temporary, dear. We explained that to you. Perhaps you're English. Perhaps you misunderstood. It is not uncommon. Rosa, at 63, sitting in her own kitchen across from the son she had just discovered she had not lost, said, and this was the sentence that nearly broke Raphael in half, I knew my English fine. I had read the papers 3 times. They were temporary. They were temporary, son. She changed them, or she lied about them, or she had someone lie about them for her. But I knew. Why didn't you fight? Raphael asked softly, not as an accusation, as a question the boy in him needed answered. Rosa looked at her hands. Because I was 20 years old, she said. Because I had $3 in my pocket the day I went back for you. Because I did not speak the kind of English that wins in a courtroom. Because I had no father and no mother and no husband and no priest and no lawyer. Because the woman who told me I had lost you was the same woman the county trusted. And because after she told me, I sat on the porch and I could not stop crying, and she brought me a cup of tea, and she told me that if I caused trouble, if I came back and made a scene, it would follow my boy. That the family would know. That it would taint him. That they would look at him differently. Rosa's voice had gone very quiet. And I believed her. I believed her, Elias. Because she was kind when she said it. She said it kindly. And I was so tired. And then 2 years later, she told you I had died. Yes. So you would stop coming. Yes. So you would stop writing. Yes. So you would accept it. Yes. Raphael sat with this. He sat with it the way a man sits with a diagnosis. He did not speak for a little while. When he spoke, his voice was the voice he used in boardrooms, except quieter and gentler and more terrible. You stay, though, he said. You stayed here. For 40 years. You took a job at her kitchen. You slept down the hall from the woman who did this to us. Why, Mama? It was the first time he had called her that. Rosa's river water eyes filled. Because this, she whispered, is the last place on earth I held you. Understand? They slept, eventually, though neither of them slept well. Rosa slept in her small room at the back of the orphanage. Raphael slept, or pretended to, on the guest room bed on the 3rd floor, directly above the private apartment where Dorothea Calloway's light had finally, around 2:30 in the morning, gone out. At 6:45 the next morning, the old iron bell on the front porch was rung, the way it had been rung every morning for 116 years. Raphael was already up. He had already made 3 phone calls. He had already authorized 3 things. He was already, in the quiet, efficient way he did things, moving. By 8, a lawyer from the city had been dispatched up the road with a copy of every piece of original paperwork Halcyon House had ever filed with the county. By 9, a forensic records specialist was reviewing the files in the basement records room. By 10, a small private investigator, a woman Raphael had used twice before, very discreet, very thorough, was knocking on the door of a retired clerk who had worked at the County Family Services office in the year Rosa Meyer had signed her papers. Raphael did none of this loudly. He did not announce it. He did not confront Dorothea Calloway at breakfast. He sat at the long table with the 19 children and ate oatmeal and said good morning to the boy with the missing front tooth and passed the butter without being asked. Dorothea came in halfway through breakfast. She had her careful curls and her small gold cross. She smiled at him across the dining hall. Mr. Hayes, I hope you slept well. Very well, thank you. And have the records been helpful? Very helpful. Wonderful. Her smile held. Do let me know if there's anything I can assist with personally. Some of those files are quite old. Context can be important. I imagine it can. He went back to his oatmeal. Dorothea Calloway, after holding her smile for a beat longer than a smile is normally held, went back to her office. Rosa, clearing plates at the next table, caught Raphael's eye for exactly 1/2 second. Wait, his eye said to hers. I am waiting, her said back. I have waited 40 years, son. I can wait one more day. Understood. Underscore the day unfolded slowly and quietly, the way these days do when the man moving the pieces is a man who knows what he is doing. The lawyer arrived. The forensic specialist found what she needed to find in the 3rd filing cabinet, 2nd drawer, near the back, in a file marked Meyer, R. Disposition. The clerk from County Family Services, now 78 and living alone in a small house with 6 cats, remembered Rosa Meyer perfectly. She remembered because Rosa Meyer was one of the very few birth mothers who had come back. Most of them never did. Rosa had come back 3 times. The clerk had been instructed, each time, by Dorothea Calloway's office, to inform Mrs. Meyer that the placement was final and that no further information could be shared with her. The clerk had been uncomfortable with this instruction. She had said so at the time, in a memorandum she had filed in her own desk drawer and never sent. She had kept that memorandum. She had kept it for 40 years in the top drawer of a dresser in her small house, because some part of her had always known that the day would come when someone would ask. She gave it to the investigator without hesitation. By 3 in the afternoon, Raphael had everything he needed. He asked Dorothea Calloway to join him in the parlor at 4. The parlor at Halcyon House was a small formal room at the front of the building, with 2 wingback chairs and a fireplace that did not work anymore. It was the room Dorothea used for donors and county inspectors, and once every 5 years, the local newspaper reporter doing a gentle feature on the orphanage's long and noble history. She came in at 4 sharp. She had reapplied her lipstick. She was wearing a different skirt suit. The small gold cross was still at her throat. Raphael was standing at the window when she came in. He did not turn around right away. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I hope this is good news. Is it about the donation?" "Please, Mrs. Calloway, sit down." She sat. He turned. He did not sit. He walked to the fireplace. On the mantel, he had laid out, neatly in a line, 3 things. The child's pencil drawing of a woman with a round face. A Xerox copy of the original paperwork Rosa Meyer had signed in 1985, with the temporary placement clause clearly and cleanly visible before it had been altered. A Xerox copy of the altered version, the one Dorothea had filed with the county 2 weeks after Rosa had signed. Dorothea looked at the mantel. Her face did not change. Not at first. Dorothea Calloway had, over 75 years, built a face that did not change easily. But her hand went, without her noticing, to the small gold cross at her throat, and she held it. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I don't know what you believe you found, but I can assure you, Mrs. Calloway." He said it gently. "Please." She stopped. "In my experience," Raphael said, and his voice was not angry. "This is what I want you to understand. This is what made Rosa, listening in the hallway outside the parlor door, begin quietly to cry. In my experience, a person who has done a bad thing has, before they are caught, 2 choices. They can admit it and ask for mercy, or they can continue the lie and ask for nothing. I am giving you the first choice. Just once. Right now. Because a woman in your kitchen has waited 40 years for the truth, and I don't want her to wait 1 more minute for it." Dorothea did not speak. "Mrs. Calloway," Raphael said, very softly, "did you alter Rosa Meyer's paperwork in 1985? Silence. Did you tell her son had died in 1987 to keep her from coming back? Silence. Did you receive, in either of those years, or in any year following, any form of payment or benefit from the Hayes family or any other party involved in my placement?" At this, Dorothea's face, which had not changed, changed. Not much. Just enough. It was the smallest crack, the smallest micro-flicker of the eye, the tiniest involuntary movement of the mouth. The sort of thing most people would have missed. But Raphael Hayes, who had spent 20 years learning to read what a face did in the half-second before its owner had decided what to say, Raphael Hayes saw it, and he knew. "Oh, Mrs. Calloway," he said quietly, and for the first time, there was something almost like sorrow in it. "They paid you." Dorothea's small gold cross was still clutched in her hand. "It was not," she began, and then stopped. It was a donation, a gift, to the house, for the children." "How much?" "Mr. Hayes, how much, Mrs. Calloway?" $40,000. In 1985. "For what?" She stopped. She looked down at her hands. For the first time in 75 years, Dorothea Calloway's straight back bent, just a little at the shoulders. "For discretion. About the birth mother." The Hayes family did not wish for any possibility of future contact. They were a prominent family. They wanted the matter closed. And the death notice. In 1987. That was your idea? It seemed kinder. Kinder to whom? Mrs. Calloway? Dorothea did not answer. Kinder to whom? To the boy, she whispered. To you. It was kinder to you, Mr. Hayes. A boy needs to grieve once, not forever. A boy needs to know. A woman who keeps showing up at the gate with saved-up coins in a jar is, forgive me, is a wound that will not heal. I told myself I was closing the wound. For her, as well. For both of you. Raphael looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Calloway, he said very softly, You kept two people apart for 40 years. You took a 20-year-old girl who loved her baby enough to come back with every dollar she had, and you told her he was dead. And then you kept her in your kitchen. You kept her here, Mrs. Calloway. You paid her a wage to stay here. Why did you do that? And this was the moment the last piece broke in Dorothea Calloway's face. Her hand came away from her gold cross. Her eyes, which had been hard and dry for 75 years, filled. Because she was a good worker, Dorothea whispered. And because she could not finish it. Because it let you watch her, Raphael said quietly. Because as long as you could see her, you could be sure she hadn't found out. Dorothea did not answer. She did not need to. Underscore. Raphael did not call the police. Not that afternoon. I want you to understand why, because it matters. He sat in the parlor with Dorothea Calloway for another 20 minutes. He asked her, without anger, how many other children in the 116 years of Halcyon House's history had been placed under similar, his word was irregular, circumstances. Dorothea, in a voice that was no longer the voice of the director of anything, admitted there had been a few. She named them when he asked. She named the years when he asked. She named the families when he asked. She was, at the end, in the small collapsed way of people who have held up a long thing and cannot hold it anymore, almost relieved to be asked. Raphael had a lawyer take notes. When it was done, he said, Mrs. Calloway, you're going to resign from this position this evening. You're going to assist my legal team in a full audit of every placement file in this building going back to the founding. You're going to make contact in writing with each of the mothers and children you named, where they are still living, and you're going to tell them the truth. My lawyers will help you. You will do this because the alternative is that I bring the county and the state and the press down on this house so hard that every child in it will be reassigned within a week, and you will go to a prison where a woman of 75 should not go. Do you understand me? Dorothea Calloway, who had not cried in front of another person in 50 years, was crying quietly now. Yes, Mr. Hayes. There's one more thing. Yes. You're going to walk out of this parlor with me right now, and you're going to tell Rosa Meyer to her face in the kitchen what you did. All of it. You're not going to make it pretty. You are not going to make it gentle. You are not going to make it kinder than it was, because she has been owed the truth for 40 years, and you're going to pay that debt today. Mr. Hayes, today, Mrs. Calloway. She stood. He held the parlor door open for her, and Dorothea Calloway, 75 years old, small gold cross at her throat, helmet of white curls, face wet, walked in her own kitchen and sat down across from the woman who had peeled potatoes and hung laundry and served stew in that kitchen for 40 years, and began slowly and painfully and fully to tell her the truth. Rosa did not interrupt. Rosa did not weep, not at first. Rosa sat with her hands folded on the table, and she listened, and her face did not change because Rosa Meyer had known, the way mothers know, the way the body knows. Rosa Meyer had known something was wrong 40 years ago, and she was only now being told the shape of the wrongness she had already carried. When Dorothea was done, Rosa was silent for a long time. Then Rosa said, and this is the sentence that I promise you will be the one that stays with you. The one that Mama always knew was the only ending worth writing. I forgive you, Dorothea. Dorothea looked up, shocked. Rosa, I forgive you. Rosa's voice was steady. Her river water eyes were steady. Not because what you did was small. It was not small. It was the largest thing anyone has ever done to me. But I am 63 years old, and my boy is sitting in the next room, and I do not have any room in my chest anymore for you. I do not have space to carry you anymore. So I am putting you down. She stood up. I'm going to go sit with my son now, Rosa Meyer said. And she walked out of her kitchen. 6 months later, on a bright morning in the early spring, Halcyon House was not closed. It was renamed. The sign over the front porch now said, in clean new letters, the Rosa Meyer Home for Children. Raphael had rebuilt it. The roof had been done. The furnace had been replaced. The 6 tall, narrow windows at the front had been reshuttered, every slat new. The gravel path had been relayed. The big orange cat, whose name, it turned out, was Mayor, had been given a small brass plaque on his food bowl because that was the kind of detail Rosa insisted on. Rosa had not, in the end, left Halcyon. She had only changed the room she slept in. She now slept in the director's apartment on the third floor because Raphael had asked her, very quietly, 3 months in, if she would consider becoming the director. She had said, "Son, I cannot run a place. I only know how to feed it." And Raphael had said, "Mama, every place that is worth anything is run by the person who knows how to feed it. The rest is just paperwork." So Rosa ran it. She had a lawyer. She had an accountant. She had Imani, who had, to her own surprise, relocated out to the country and discovered she liked silence. Rosa still peeled potatoes in the mornings because that is what her hands knew how to do. But she also, now, read stories to the children on Friday nights. And she kept on her desk, in a small frame she had bought at a thrift store in town for $2.50, a child's pencil drawing of a woman with a round face and long hair, with "Me Mama" written in unsteady letters underneath. Raphael came up on weekends. He slept in the guest room. He sat at the long table for breakfast with the 19, now 23, children. The small boy with the missing front tooth, his tooth had come in now. He'd given up a lot of his earlier theories. Had asked once, seriously, if Mr. Hayes was going to marry Miss Rosa, because the small boy did not entirely understand grown-up relationships, but he understood that Mr. Hayes came a lot. Raphael had laughed, the short, surprised laugh that Rosa had recognized across 40 years of silence, and said, "No, son, she's my mama. I've been looking for her a long time." And the small boy had said, "Oh, okay," and gone back to his eggs. Dorothea Calloway lived out her remaining years in a small apartment in town, paid for by a quiet arrangement Raphael made and never publicized. She came once a month to the home she had run for 50 years, at Rosa's invitation, not his, and she sat in the garden, and she did not speak much, and Rosa brought her tea, and they watched the children play. It was not friendship. It was something smaller and stranger and, in its way, more honest. It was forgiveness still being tended like a plant that needed watering. Mama always said grudges are heavier than people understand, and grace is lighter than people expect, and the smart money, in the long run, is on the lighter thing. One evening, at the end of that first year, Rosa and Raphael sat on the porch after the children had gone to bed. The big orange cat, Mayor, was asleep across Raphael's feet. The sky was doing something beautiful over the field. Rosa said, "Son, can I ask you something?" "Anything, Mama." "The drawing. You kept it in a safe deposit box for all those years when you thought I was gone." "What?" Raphael thought about it for a minute. "Because," he said slowly, "some part of me never completely believed the story I was told. And I think I kept the drawing because as long as I still had it, the question wasn't closed. I could still ask it, even if only in the dark, even if only to myself. I didn't know what I was waiting for, Mama. I only knew I wasn't done." Rosa reached over. She took his hand, her red-knuckle hand, his smooth one. She held it. "I wasn't done either," she said. "Every morning at 6:45, when I rang that bell, I used to think, maybe today. I don't know why. There was no reason to think it. I had been told he was gone. But every morning at 6:45 I used to think, maybe today. And then I would go make the potatoes." Raphael looked at her. "Mama," he said, "you know what I think?" "What, son?" "I think the thing a good mother gives a child is the thing that finds its way back, even when nothing else can." She told him you were dead. He told me you were dead. 40 years of paperwork, 40 years of distance, 40 years of 2 different continents in some ways, and I still walked up that gravel path on a Tuesday, and my body knew the sound of it. You still smelled lavender soap in my dreams, and I never knew why. The thing you gave me when you held me for 11 days, Mama, nobody could take it out of me. Not Dorothea, not my adoptive parents, not 40 years, not even me." Rosa's eyes filled. "Elias," she said. "Mama, you can be both, you know." She patted his hand. "Raphael and Elias. The archangel and the prophet. You can be both. A boy can have 2 names. That's the thing about love. It doesn't make you choose." They sat there for a long time. The half-moon came up over the field. Somewhere inside the house, a small boy laughed in his sleep. Mayor the cat purred. And Mama always said, and you knew this already, didn't you, deep down, because your own mama said in her own words somewhere along the way, Mama always said that the world, in its deeper logic, cannot let a thing like a mother's love go unfinished. It has a long patience. It will wait 40 years. It will wait 100. It will wait as long as it needs to. But one day, on some Tuesday morning you did not see coming, it will bring the child back up the gravel path, and it will open the door, and it will put the cup of tea in front of him, and it will say, "Son," and the circle that should never have been broken in the first place will quietly close. Underscore. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. Mama always said the people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, I think you'll find the other videos on your screen are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. There's always a story waiting at Mama Told Me.